Welcome back to Previously Prohibited. I'm Jenin Eunice here with my co-host Melissa Whitty, and we have a wonderful guest today, Brad Pearce. He is an independent journalist. He's done some really great writing from the sort of libertarian perspective and has some really interesting views on the Middle East, Russia, Ukraine, I don't know if we'll get into that, but various foreign policy issues and domestic policy issues. So welcome, Brad. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. You know, I'm invited on a fair amount of podcasts, but rarely with two such lovely ladies, so it is a pleasure to be here.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. So I guess we wanted to start a little bit by asking you about your background, politically especially, where you sort of lie on the political spectrum or the ideological spectrum, however you want to think of it.
Well, I mean, I guess my main background for political involvement was in like the Ron Paul 2008 campaign when I was a young man. I was a very early supporter of that and very heavily involved. So I was kind of more in that general space for most of my adult life, more on the conservative side of it. But you know, the whole COVID thing kind of just kind of discredited libertarianism really badly. Some people would say because libertarians responded so poorly to it, but more accurately because we saw the absolute hellscape that the corporations want for us. So it really kind of discredited the idea that things would be fine if they had more power in society and the government wasn't restricting them or whatever. So like after some time in the wilderness, I don't know, like I was trying to tell you before the show, I'm what you would call a basically finist, which is an ideology where you basically find a pragmatic sort of special settlement that works fine enough that you can live your life without being too bothered by the government, and everything goes fine.
That's a good philosophy. You have a lot of knowledge of foreign policy, especially in the Middle East and Russia, Ukraine, and maybe other topics we just haven't touched on that much, but how did you come to having so much knowledge on those topics?
But I don't know, how does anyone learn anything? I guess you just read about it over time. I mean, I've been following these things for a long time, so like I was like really, really against like the invasion of Iraq when I was younger. I mean, and even like the invasion of Afghanistan, I was actually against when I was in like 8th grade. I was the only one who opposed it.
How old are you?
I'm 37.
Okay.
So, I was in 8th grade when 9/11 happened, and then, I was really, really against the invasion of Iraq, so I was always, interested in foreign policy in that regard. I mean, honestly, actually, I've talked about this a lot of times, but, like, when I was in, I believe, 5th grade, they started, like, bombing Kosovo, and it made, like, this really strong impression on me, because everyone was acting like this is, like, a normal thing to do, is to, be bombing Kosovo. Like, do Americans understand, like, what bombs do to people, like what they're doing? This has nothing to do with us. Like, this is really violent, and everyone in our society is like acting like this is a normal way to behave. So then when 9/11 happened, they're like, oh, what did we ever do to anyone? And I was like, do you not remember how we were bombing that country I had never previously heard of just like 2 years ago? Am I the only one that paid attention to that? So I mean, from there, I kind of knew something was wrong with our society, and I guess you could say it obsessed me over time. But in terms of knowing about the various events, I mean, I guess I'm just a good researcher. A lot of these things that I end up writing a 10,000-word article about, I know very little about when I start. It's just a matter of figuring it out for the purpose of writing the article.
But so you say that, but also just saying that you paid attention to Kosovo as a kid is you're naturally interested in it, right? And I think anytime that you're naturally interested, especially in things like foreign policy, because I was the same way. I loved to watch headline news. I loved to watch the 30-minute when I was a kid. It was like almost comforting to me in a weird way, like that, oh, the world is always moving, it's always turning. So I was like the only one that knew like anything about the Kosovo War when I was a kid. I'm 2 years older than you, so yeah.
And I'm 2 years older than Mel, so
yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. And so, but you're on the West Coast. You're in Washington State.
Yeah, I'm like very near Idaho though.
Oh, so that actually explains it. There's some pretty hard right ones over there.
Yeah, I live like 2 miles from Idaho. I do almost nothing in Washington because the state's a hellhole. But like I live in my hometown. I'm not going to move just because the state government are assholes.
Yeah. Okay, now I have, because for some reason I was putting you like right outside of Seattle, and I'm
south of Spokane.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And the Idahoans, they're like practically separatists, right?
Well, I wouldn't take it that far, but it's a really cool state. I mean, the amount of libs that live there like totally hate it for being what it is. But they give all these statistics about Idaho having, say, like low educational attainment rates or like low I don't know, average incomes or whatever. And it's like, well, I don't know. Like you're thinking that someone's not having a good life, making $30,000 a year, living in a trailer in the woods, and I don't know, going fishing like 3 times a week or whatever. So like I don't know. I feel like they're putting different expectations on people than what life is actually like. Not that there aren't plenty of poor people, but Idaho is actually a pretty well ran state, and plenty of people have very nice lives there.
Yeah, yeah, I think it's all perspective. I always dream about living in a almost kind of like a shack on the beach, and I can't imagine.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, shacks on the beach cost about $2 or $3 million, and that's literal shacks on the beach.
Oh so, yeah, and trailers in the woods in Idaho are not expensive actually. So
yeah, but yeah, so that's your background now. Very specifically, obviously, because you're a lot like me. You're commentating on the right, and then boom, October 7th happens, and then our whole side loses its ever-loving mind. All the lessons we claim to have learned from Iraq out the window, and it's like bloodlust taking over. How was that for you? Because it was so intense for me.
Well, I'm, I've always been more on, like, the Ron Paul, Pat Buchanan side of things, so, like, most of my closer friends, like, the people, like, at antiwar.com and stuff like that I paid more attention to, have always, been opposed to the U.S. relationship with Israel. The ones that went more crazy were the people that Jenin was friends with that I didn't know as well, that were not really on the right. They were more like, liberals that revolted against the 5% most crazy things that the Democrats were doing, but are otherwise total libs. But overall, it's always been annoying. I mean, I went through the whole, war on terror. Like, this is why, like, the American Conservative was founded, which is always one of my favorite magazines. I'm very proud to write there now, which I didn't start writing regularly until I was much older. It's, going pretty well. So I'm, like, writing for magazines that I used to only read for a number of years. So for my, like, more specific social circle, it wasn't really that jarring. But, it did totally, it broke up the teams. I keep saying this, like, it is kind of making light of very awful events, but, we had the same teams for the last, like, 6 or 7 current events, like, current things before 10/7 happened, and, they were not things that should have obviously been related. It was like, Russiagate and Black Lives Matter and getting your COVID vaccine and stuff. Everyone all fell on the same team, and, it was pretty obvious that these shouldn't be landing this way every time with only like 5% variation. So then that did totally it totally broke up the teams like that, which I think was really overdue. And it's
why
made
do you think that
more interesting.
Sorry. Yeah, no, why I didn't mean to interrupt. Why do you think the liberals sort of who came over as a result of their disillusionment with the Democrats over COVID were the most rabid on the October 7th stuff?
Well, I mean, for one thing, I'll be honest, I had no idea so many of them were Jewish. I had never given it any thought, and I simply had no idea until this happened, and then they all, like, announced that publicly. They all, like, said that. So, I mean, that has, like, something to do with it, that they do have the ethnic, genetic, whatever, like, link to what's going on. But then others were just, like, Christian Zionist fanatics as well. So, it's not really clear to me. I mean, I would say that Jewish people in general have been, very successful in, like, academia and sciences and kind of other areas where a lot of the dissenters were coming from. And then, Israel-Palestine has really unfortunately become a proxy war for cultural issues in the U.S. that, have actually basically nothing to do with what's going on in the Middle East. And, so, I mean, I don't know. It is very strange, though. I will say I did not at all realize so many of those people were Zionists until that happened, and they all went totally crazy on it. I mean, and then the thing about that is that you realize you're just as susceptible to misinformation as anyone else. So, like, when, say, like, Screams Without Words came out, they were on, like, oh, here's all these Hamas apologists studied on. It's like, I could read this in like 5 seconds and tell you everything that's wrong with it. Like, you know, it was like Max Blumenthal and Aaron Mate that actually like did that, but, you know, went through and like debunked a lot of it. But, like, I was able to read it and be like, you know, this is a crock of shit from looking at it just right away. So I don't know why they weren't able to, but, you know, at the same time, you know, any kind of partisanship can make you really stupid in general. You know, they have an incentive to lie, I guess, but it was pretty amazing the amount of them that had previously showed the ability to see through these things and understand that just bought every lie. Again, it didn't even learn anything as the lies kept getting debunked.
No. Yeah, and nothing. Like a lot of them, I mean, they're still going with it. I mean, I'm still I've blocked a lot of them, but they constantly comment on my feed and like, they're all want to get Khalil deported, and they just like, it's not like they reacted, you know, they were traumatized right after and, you know, had to collect their thoughts or whatever. That's been a year and a half now.
Yeah.
And they haven't like,
Yeah, it's crazy, you know, and I was like the first one that wrote about Zaka after this happened. Like, so in Israel, everyone knew what was up with them, and they still went along with the lie anyway, because of course, I swear to God, that is the specific reason that they revived Hebrew as their daily language.
Can you kind of lay that out and just
so basically, this organization Zaka is in Israel, especially among religiously observant Jews. There's weird Talmudic rules about cleaning, like dealing with bodies that were killed by violence, basically, at various Jewish rules of different sorts, and so. These Orthodox groups serve as kind of like volunteer ambulance groups. I mean, they get money from the state as well. But so the main one, Zaka, was started by this guy, Yehuda Meshi Zahav, and in 2021, I believe was the year, he was awarded the he was awarded like the Israel Award, their top, civilian Medal of Honor, not Medal of Honor, but, you know, that sort of thing. And then it came out that he was like a serial sexual predator going back like 40 years, and that everyone knew about it, and it was a huge scandal in Israel. And then he killed himself before it like went to court, basically. But there had been corruption of these organizations forever. So basically, it was, you know, that guy Yossi Landau was the one that was talking about, they put babies in ovens, they tied them up at the table and killed them and all this stuff. So like I saw that.
Hold up. Is this the guy that came to the RJC conference and gave to the Republican Jewish conference in Las Vegas, where he said they took the babies and they cut their heads off and we didn't know which head belonged to which baby? Because
I believe so.
Okay, yeah.
Anyway, so I saw that and I was like, okay, something's not right about this. So I kind of just started pulling at the thread of it. As you do when you're, I mean, I fact check, I mean, I'm sure Mel does as well. I fact check random things just constantly, and to see if there's anything there, just to verify just the smallest little thing. And this time it was crazy once I started getting into it, and most of the work had already been done by Israeli media. I did original work on like their 990 forms showing that like none of the money these people have ever raised in the United States is provable to have gone to Israel in any way, much less to, you know, a charitable organization. Incidentally, they have listed on these forms that they sent like $150,000 to like unnamed parties in the Middle East, and that's just what it says on their forms. Like, $150 to region Middle East, and there's no name on it. It's like, dude, if you and I did that, the FBI would be kicking our door down by the end of this sentence.
Right.
You know,
yeah.
So it was crazy. So I went through all of that, and, you know, I managed to get out this huge piece on it, like 11 days after 10/7 happened, when, you know, no one was willing to question them. So, like, and, you know, my entire reasoning for doing that, because I thought about, like, do I really want to attack, like, after, like, a mass casualty event, do I really want to attack a group that cleans up the bodies? That's going to get me a lot of hatred, you know, etc. But, like, I was like, no, these people have, like, UN observer status. Like, they're going to be testifying about this all over. They're going to, you know, this is going to be used for a lot of things. So, like, it's really important to get it on the record that they're not credible about any matter. And then, you know, as happens, like 4 months later, The Intercept ripped off my reporting and acted like they were being courageous.
It's so wild. And, you know, I mean, kudos to you, because I'll tell you, I didn't start with the, I didn't really start in hard after, I think, you know, the Grey Zone put out some pieces. I remember seeing your piece and being confident, like feeling confident, having read your piece. I was like, okay, this is well researched. He's right. And I knew it. I knew in my gut it was bullshit what they were saying. you know? But it was like, yeah, it's that very touchy thing. It's the same thing that happened with COVID, right? Where they were saying like all of these deaths, you know, especially with the China stuff, like they're just dropping dead in the middle of the streets, and you're like, this is bullshit. Like we know it's bullshit, but then everybody's freaking out, so you don't want to be the super callous person, you know?
I'm always that person.
Yeah. Well, I kind of am too, but you know, I don't like to do it online. In real life, I'm like, that's a bad, you know, I don't know. You guys wouldn't even want to hear. I'd probably get banned from everything if real life had TOS, you know?
Yeah, so, I mean, anyway, I would just say that I actually, like, my background is, in, like, my academic background is actually that I have a degree in literature, and I'm, like, the only foreign policy writer I know of that actually has that background, but it's really, like, my ability to understand narratives and, like, the different kinds of truth and fiction, because, like, there's... In literature, there's a concept that was kind of fleshed out, I guess, by, like, the naturalistic Emile Zola and people like that, there's kind of two ways of being true. Like, a story can be, like, your telling of what happened, and there's also true in the sense of, like, does it accurately reflect the human experience, you know? Because, like, even someone telling the real story of something that happened to them, it's hard for them to describe what it was like to live through it and stuff like that. So it makes it pretty easy for me to watch something like this and to, you know, have some idea what's going on. But so I used to try to explain things to people this way, and I'd say, like, you know, have you ever seen a film? Like, would it make sense if a film, you know, worked out this way? And it turns out every time I would say that, there's a Marvel movie exactly like what I was describing was too stupid to work as a film, which is why I am now convinced that the MCU and its consequences have been a disaster for the human race.
Yeah. I would absolutely agree. And if nothing else, they're just dumb. I have a joke with my family. They say, "Do you want to go see this movie?" I'm like, "No," because I can tell you how it ends. I know exactly how it's going to end. There's going to be a giant city that's going to get blown up. There's going to be an existential threat. The giant city's going to get blown up. Everything's going to get wrecked. The heroes will win in the end, but they won't totally defeat the existential threat. It will just get pushed into the background for a couple years.
For the next movie, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, it is a really big problem that there's this extreme hysteria whenever something happens, and if you question things, then it's hard to do. I did it with COVID at the beginning, but I didn't do it with October 7th for a few reasons. I just didn't know. I was so terrified to get into the fray. I was also like 8 months pregnant, and I was kind of like,
oh yeah, for sure.
I went through shit with COVID. I want to concentrate on the baby instead of like having a new like thing that's upsetting. So I kind of tuned it out at the beginning. But it's when it's at the beginning that it's actually really important, because it was this atrocity propaganda that I think, I mean, look, that everything that happened in Gaza might have happened anyway. I'm not really sure what the alternate universe looks like where it wasn't the atrocity propaganda, it was just the truth. I suspect they wouldn't have gotten away with it if it had just been like, you know, if the public had gotten the actual story, which was like Hamas took a lot of hostages. Their main goal seems to have been to take hostages. People got killed because it was a, you know, violent situation. But it wasn't this, like, you know, monstrous event.
I've extensively covered, you know, what Israeli media has written about this, because other people in America... I've been saying this whole time that, like, newspaper rooms in America need a dedicated Haaretz reporter whose whole job is just to put into American media what Haaretz is reporting about what's going on in Israel. Yeah. But also, like, Ynet has had some crazy ones. So, like, I denied early on, you know, that they would have issued a Hannibal directive, and I totally owned up to this. I mean, and in my article I said, like, that people like, you know, like Caitlin Johnstone and Max Blumenthal, et cetera, like, maybe they did get ahead of themselves and they were kind of irresponsible in extrapolating from a few data points, like, you know, the one helicopter strafing, you know, whatnot. But they were right, and you have to get ahead of the narrative solidifying. So, like, I mean, I 100% acknowledged, but that was all the way back in January of 2024, and you still can't get people to believe this. But yeah, I mean, I acknowledge that I was wrong about that, and that they were right, and I was overly cautious about it. But then it became, you know, more clear than you can imagine. There's been just absolutely really long stories about this in Ynet that, you know, I often write, like, media analysis threads. You know, my thought is, I always kind of had this thought where I'm like, couldn't anyone just read the story and figure all of this out easily enough? But no, they absolutely could not. So, you know, it's the Israeli media has told us everything, but, you know, it doesn't break quarantine.
Yeah, people like bulleted points. They don't want to, it comes off a little bit overwhelming, and I get it. I like that they like it because it makes them read my stuff. But,
Right.
yeah, I kind of approached all of this because I used to work for a criminal defense attorney, and I've seen, and Jenny used to be a criminal defense attorney, so she also as well knows that, you look at enough discovery files and you realize the government just lies. Like, they
Oh,
will just
yeah.
lie. Like, they will just tell the most outrageous lies. Like, they will present you, I'm not even kidding you, with like three-inch binders worth of discovery, laying out this thing, and it's a crock of shit from beginning to end, and they're just shoving stuff in, trying to make it look, to fit the story that they want to tell. And I have seen whole cases fabricated from beginning to end. And so whenever I hear a narrative now, I'm like, I got to see more than just whatever the government's word means very, very little. That's like a rough sketch outline that we're going to kind of hold it up over here and we'll maybe go by it to see. So.
And the Netanyahu government's
It's like 1,000 times worse, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but as much as they've cracked down on free press in Israel, there still is an oppositional media there that is in most ways much better than ours in terms of being willing to question their narratives, in terms of doing really good reporting, and in terms of trying to get to the bottom of these issues. And so, like I said, there was the really big Ynet one, the first hours of October 7th that came out in January of 2024, and that, I think it was like Dan Cohen posted a thing that was just like a preview of it, and then I really had to be watching for it to find it, and so like ultimately Max posted it, and I was like the first one to get a thread out showing that, and then to like write about it and everything, and it didn't make really any meaningful news. Then in my article was called A Hannibal Directive by Any Other Name, and then it came out again in July that they did in fact call it a Hannibal Directive while they were ordering it, despite that was repealed and that they said, that they didn't, and that they did this all over. The other thing we learned, and this is kind of complicated because it does make Gazans generally look bad, as opposed to just like Hamas generally, but like, what it said in that Ynet story is that only like 9/10 of people that broke through the fence were just random people, not actual militant groups. Which, bear in mind, this is going to be the least responsible people in society. Like, you know what I mean? Like the most violent, the least responsible, like angry young men. Like any, most rational people are not going to go running into Israel in that circumstance because they're going to figure they're going to, get themselves killed or cause more problems or whatever. So, you have a lot of these that they're trying to claim it's Hamas, and it's like, okay, well, this is people not in any sort of uniform, not with any sort of normal issued weapons. Yes, they are committing an act of violence against someone, but they're nothing about what they're doing makes them appear to be military, and it has no military utility. So, yeah, I mean, the inmates broke out of the jail in general, just led by the militant groups, and this is in Ynet. It's 9/10 of them were not actually what you would consider professional militants or whatever from Hamas or PIJ.
Right. Yeah, and if you read about the days and the weeks prior to 10/7, which never gets talked about, but I mean, we're talking about like right up until like October 4th. So like the 26th of September to October 4th, there were riots actually in Gaza over new, they had reimposed, I was just reading about this yesterday, just re-educating someone about this yesterday. They had just reimposed new restrictions on what could and could not be on the blockade, and people had been like lighting these incendiary balloons, right? There was like, I guess 3 of them lit, and they went over the fan. They get like shot down, they get knocked down, but in response to those incendiary balloons, and we're talking about like little tiny balloons that are supposed to like start a fire, right? Wherever they land, but they get seen and they just get taken out. There were full airstrikes done on Gaza. So like you're talking about little like firecracker balloons getting thrown over the fence, and in response they are taking out full buildings with the military airstrikes. And so it was really intense going up to October 7th, and then you had right before, what was it? It was the 5th or the 6th was the Al-Aqsa, the raid of the Al-Aqsa mud, or the
Flood.
they call it the flood, but it was the mosque.
Al-Aqsa flood,
But it was when the settlers raided into the actual mosque. It was like the day before October 7th, and so I mean, you just have there's a lot of hatred building on both sides going up. So I can see people like all of a sudden we get 27 breaches in the fence, and people, if I'm living in Gaza, I'm gonna be like crossing in. Like, why wouldn't you? Unfortunately, I wish people would have seen that. I think it was a trap. I just don't think that many, considering the. I think a lot of it was just allowed to happen. I just can't see how all of the defenses all went down all at one time.
Oh, yeah, I mean, there was another big report about that, about just all the various ways that they failed, and it's hard to come to a different conclusion than that they were willfully negligent because they wanted something like this to happen. I mean, what you run into, though, is that the things are more complex than you think, so, like, it's possible that they were thinking, like, oh, there'll be, like, a limited failure, and then we'll turn it back, then it will be an excuse to airstrike, and then it got out of control, or... there's a lot of moving parts in doing something like, letting something like that happen. But, what they said is that the main, I don't remember his name, but, the main Hamas planner or whatever almost called off the attack because Israel's lack of response was so egregious that he thought it was a trap. And then they didn't say why he ultimately went forward. What's really ridiculous about this whole time is that, they keep saying, like, oh, Israel has the right to defend itself. It's like, well, it would have been nice if they did that in the first place because they moved all of their units up to the West Bank to protect protect settlers that were trying to attack Palestinians because they were unwilling to just arrest the radical settler terrorists and, use the criminal justice system against them. So, like, they weren't properly guarding the border. That's a huge part of what happened. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's maddening.
So, did you have hope when Trump got elected that things would change in terms of the United States policy towards Israel?
It was a known cost that he's a total Israel cuck surrounded by fanatical Zionists and whatnot, and that, he's full of, like, surrounded by Iran hawks and everything. I mean, at the same time, like, in many ways, being as, like, indecisive and weak as Biden and Harris is actually a lot more dangerous than someone being outright hostile. You'll find even, like, enemies will say this, like, even, I don't know, like, the USSR leaders preferred working with Republicans because they felt like they knew where they stood, or, that sort of thing. So, I mean, I don't know, like, even if this is worse, but, we figure that Trump does presumably want it to come to some sort of conclusion, but you never know what the guy's gonna do. I mean honestly, the Democrats managed to make me feel so miserable, like in my own personal life, that I was not actually voting that heavily based on foreign policy. I was just voting on the fact that I hate them so goddamn much. I did not personally. It's like a quality of life issue how much those people irritate me. So, like, I couldn't handle it anymore. So, I mean, I didn't really think anything was going to be getting better. I didn't really make any argument that Israel or the situation in Palestine was a reason to vote for Donald Trump. I made a case that the Democrats are retards and maniacs that we should not have to languish under anymore.
Which I think there's a good case to be made for that. Yeah.
I hate both of them equally, so
I voted under the idea that I was cautiously optimistic. It's just been so depressing to see, but at the same time I'm like, you have to punish genocide. Like, you just have to. Like, there had to be a punishment. Like, you can't just let people do what Joe Biden did, which is so egregious what he did, and let them get away with. And even, like, I was like, just did like a real quick tweet today, like, just detailing all of the strikes on Yemen during the Biden administration. Like, I knew they did the strike in October. I did not know that they used 30,000-pound bombs, 5 of them, on Yemen. Yeah. And that's why I'm like, yeah, like, I've known about all of these strikes, but I knew they used the 5,000-pound bombs. But when I saw 30,000, I was like, this is what the is going on? I had to look up Nagasaki today to see how much Big Boy weighed. It weighed 10,900. So obviously it's a little bit different bomb technology, but you're talking about, we dropped one of those and we dropped 5 that were 3 times heavier in Yemen in October. Like, what the hell? And you wouldn't even know because the media just covers for all of it. So, no, there has to be a punishment for that. So
I mean, no one's really ever held accountable, and I don't think the Democrats are at all taking the lesson that this had anything to do with Palestine or anything else. But I don't know. Kamala Harris couldn't come up with any sort of position on it. Who knows what would even be happening in that regard. I mean, and frankly, the Russia-Ukraine situation worries me much more because of, the nukes and the ability for it to make like a larger, war and everything else like that. But overall, like it's all very grim, and the Biden administration also worked pretty hard to poison the well in Sudan before leaving office, and made moves that very specifically had no point but to make it harder for Trump to try to do anything to to make people find any resolution to that conflict. So I don't know. It's all bad. The U.S. foreign policy has been like this my whole adult life because 9/11 happened 24 years ago now, and we just never stopped this shit. Like, this is the 5th administration in a row to bomb Yemen, I believe. Well, and there's like a whole list of countries, like 3 or 4 of them that this I think is the 5th administration in the row to bomb. Also because Somalia and Iraq. I guess I don't think he's bombed Iraq yet. I'm not sure. Anyway, regardless, it's crazy. They just do this all the time. Once again, this comes back to the whole thing I was saying about Kosovo. Like, I noticed this when I was a kid, but Americans are so used to just this being something that you do. Like, other countries do not actually behave this way. Like, France kind of behaves this way. Iran has proxies or whatever. Israel behaves this way for sure, no denying that. And really, no other countries on Earth, at least that I can think of, actually just randomly, bomb their neighbors or whatever, with a bunch of different ones. Like, the Saudi Arabia and UAE were, really involved in Yemen, but that's really the one time they did that. And, everyone goes to war sometimes. Well, not everyone, but, almost everyone goes to war sometimes. But the only countries that, like, regularly do a bunch of interventions and are always bombing people and acting like it's normal are those 3.
I think, like, most Americans don't actually comprehend the reality of it. They think it's like a video game or something, or there's some extreme lack of empathy. And I think once people actually had to grasp how many, like, that people just like you, like, imagine you and your family. I mean, to all of us, it's obvious because we have empathy, and that's why this stuff bothers us. But, like a bomb could land on you and your family and blow you up and everything you love, and, the kids you raised and everything are just gone.
And nobody will care because somebody else will say, well, you were a terrorist. And
then took me really a long time to, I guess, learn or conceptualize, I don't know which way you would want to say it, is that, like Obama's drone campaign in North Waziristan, Pakistan, I always kind of assumed that, like, those bombs would, I don't know, come out of nowhere and would just kind of liquidate you or whatever you want to say all at once. I only found out years later that, like, they could see the Predator drones above them all the time. Like, half of total people living there had nightmares constantly and, like, PTSD because you could see them going over your head all the time and had no idea when they were randomly going to strike you while you're, like, gathering wood or whatever. And this went on for years under Obama. There's psychological studies about it.
Yeah, it's so, like, I saw this, I was looking at these things the other day, like, these people from Yemen, and all of the pictures, the people looked a little crazy, right? And then I was, like, thinking, as I was going through, I was going through the timeline of how much bombing, I was like, well, no shit, they're crazy. Like, anyone would be crazy if you had been subjected to this much bombing. Like,
they just hate us for our freedom, Mel. They just hate us for our freedom.
They just, and it's like, it's so insane. Like, and that's what I was talking about. Like, I like tweeted about this earlier because somebody, I made this random tweet yesterday. I'm at my daughter's softball game, right? And, like, her freaking classroom had to get moved the other day, or
I saw that,
or what, 2 days ago, because the freaking roof was leaking, right? And it was like, and I knew about that, and I'm like watching her play softball, and then we've got this video of the F-18s taking off from the carriers to go bomb Yemen again, and I'm just, like, so pissed because it's just, number one, the Yemeni are, like, the toughest people on the planet. Like, the Houthis are, like, big old middle fingers up, they don't care, bomb away, and they'll still be there. And so it's like such a waste. It's like I'm watching, but couple $100 million just gonna go get burned in the desert tonight. And then so I'm super annoyed, and I just tweet that out, and it like goes viral for some reason. I don't even know why. Still to this day, I mean, it's got like 8 million views or something right now. It's got It's got like
that is crazy.
Yeah, it's got over 200,000 likes, and I like muted it last night because I was like, this is weird. It was like at 100,000. I was like, whatever, just mute, because I was getting so many stupid. Everybody's trying to give me a civics lesson on like, you know, that it's the local and your local and state governments that fund your schools. Maybe you need to. And then I kept having people tell me, well, why don't you go down and fix it? Like, yeah, I'm gonna go up and get on the freaking roof and fix the holes in the roof so that you can freaking continue to bomb Israel. Yeah,
they would definitely arrest you for that, by the way.
Yeah, and she just happens to go to a really old school. It's like a historical building. It was built in 1924. It's just but again, it's like, these are things that should be getting taken care of. Anyways, where did I start this rant?
I don't know, but I was just going to say quickly, the Yemenis have like the second highest rate of private firearm ownership in the world, behind us, obviously.
I love it.
And so, like, people always talk about, like, oh, well, no one would ever be able to invade Texas because, there's like a gun behind every door. Yeah, that's also true of Yemen. Like, they have, like, an AK in every household, basically, and pistols, and those knives they carry on their waist.
Well, I just couldn't get over how many people, when I went and scrolled it this morning, how many people kept saying, Biden never responded. Biden let them do whatever they wanted, and he never responded.
Biden bombed them a bunch.
Yeah. And I'm talking like hundreds of people commented with that. And
yeah, well, it's this general idea that, like, you can accomplish anything with, enough willpower. And, men are really prone to this. Like, every man thinks he could, like, win a fight with a bear, basically, that's just how men think. I don't know why women tend to be even more deranged on foreign policy when they are leaders, like, Kaya Kallas or whoever else in the EU. I don't have an answer to that. But regardless, men, there's just this general way that men think where it's like, oh, if you are dedicated enough, if you care enough, if you sacrifice enough, you'll ultimately win. And it's like, dude, look at Japan in World War II. Like, those people thought their emperor was an actual god, and it was like their divine destiny. This was deep in their psyche. They were willing to, like, kill themselves if they had the slightest shame of anything. Some of them were willing to stay in the woods as guerrillas by themselves for 20 years after the war. It wasn't just that one guy. He was just there the longest. And they still lost the war because you cannot win on willpower alone, nor on what is right or wrong for your people, nor anything else. Like, a lot of factors go into winning a war, and it's very provably true that you're not going to stop the Houthis, who, by the way, are basically actually the government of Yemen, not Houthi rebels, by airstriking them, because it would have worked a long-ass time ago. The Saudis and the Emiratis put a lot of effort into this with U.S. backing, and they did not get anywhere.
Yeah, I tried to explain this to somebody on the phone yesterday, and it was like, they just weren't getting it. And I'm like, they're like, well, no, we have to stop their supply lines, and I'm like, I'm fairly certain the Saudis tried that. I mean, they went 9 years, 9 hard years, and they couldn't. I don't know. I know that from what I understand, most of their munitions they make themselves. I don't know if they're like mining the metals.
I mean, making a gun and making gunpowder is not actually that hard if you have old school skills. They've known how to do it for hundreds and hundreds of years there. Yeah. I'd just say one more thing here is that both sides in the Sudanese civil war fought in Yemen. The RSF fought for the UAE, and the SAF fought for Saudi Arabia. So they were on the same side at the time. And those people, especially the RSF, are like a lot gnarlier than anything our soldiers are allowed to do in war, and they still did not get anywhere.
Isn't Yemen where, like, Egypt also, they said, like, Yemen was, like, Egypt's Vietnam? Didn't they get dragged into that for a while?
Yeah, so there was the whole United Arab Republic that was the idea that Nasser was going to be in charge of everywhere, like a pan-Arab state, and it was a disaster, so it was only Egypt and Syria, and then it was like part of Yemen pledged to them, and yeah, Egypt, I don't know that much about that, but yeah, Egypt was involved there. They tried to annex Yemen into something called the United Arab Republic that everyone agrees was a just total disaster in general.
Yeah.
So, obviously things have taken a turn for the worse in Gaza, the whole area. And Netanyahu has started bombing again, and I think more than 400 people were killed overnight.
Yeah. 410.
At least,
what I saw.
Yeah, at least 80 children. Do you have any hope that this will get better?
Yeah, what do you think?
why do you think, and also I'm interested in your insights about why do you think Trump did a 180 on this, like coming in and appearing to really want a ceasefire, having Witkoff get the ceasefire, and then something changed. Was he fooling us all along, or did he get pressured in the interim by the Israel lobby?
It's not entirely clear to me why, what made Israel unilaterally start this again. Nor what exactly. Sometimes Trump's games are really obvious. Sometimes they're more complex. As I was saying before, the idea that people have plans for everything seems overrated. Tolstoy goes into this at great lengths. Like, once you know what's happened, it's easy to say that these few events were what caused it, but then you're ignoring, like, every other idea people had, et cetera, every other thing that happened that doesn't match with your the way you want to understand what happened. So, I can't really say what's in Trump's mind about this. He likes to be the guy that goes in and made the deal or whatever, so, I don't think that... I don't really see any point that he would have bought some time and done something. I guess they did get some of the hostages out, but I really don't know. I have a pretty dim view on the prospects of the Palestinian cause generally. I think that the so-called axis of resistance was really irresponsible in, besides the Houthis, I would say, was really irresponsible in kind of encouraging them that they would have this level of support and then not doing it. Hezbollah didn't really attack aggressively after 10/7. Iran didn't help them that much. Assad was still in power in Syria and had some ability to do that. He got overthrown anyway, so, I guess nothing worse could have happened to him. And none of them really backed them up after Hamas broke out like that. And then once again, I think Hamas... they've said this, that everything on 10/7 went way farther than they expected. They were just grabbing some hostages, and then Israel wasn't guarding its border, which they didn't expect. So then, it evoked a response worse than they thought. But, I don't want to call either side the good guys. I'm comfortable enough calling Israel the bad guys. We'll just say there's degrees of bad guys. Regardless, the bad guys win sometimes. As brutal and anti-human as Israel's pager attack was, it was really effective in damaging Hezbollah's leadership. They killed Nasrallah. Iran is isolated. Syria's fallen, and they can't move supplies there. I don't see any real direction moving forward, and Israel's unwilling to give Gaza back to the collaborationist Palestine Authority to get, in a West Bank situation of just slow death like they have going on now. So I don't see any good way it's moving forward. For the most part, Israel has won here, unfortunately.
I saw a very interesting analysis today from someone. I guess Putin came out and kind of signaled that he would stay out of it if that was the interpretation that some took between talks between Putin and Trump. And someone said that Putin had an interest in not allowing a fourth power essentially to rise up out of the Middle East. So you have, Russia, China, and then the U.S., and they don't want a strong powerhouse coming out of the Arab world to have to deal with, to have to kind of treat as an equal. And so they apparently see Iran as potential for that, and that would be why Putin would be willing to, I guess, take a step back. This was somebody's interpretation. It was some analysis, and so I thought that was interesting. I thought it was weird that Putin basically, I forget exactly what he said. It was Fiona. Somebody had it. Let me see if I can pull it up. I don't think I did.
Anyway, Iran's practically a non-player at this point. I don't see why they would be doing that. And also you have to understand that they have total dominance over the Caspian Sea. They have the ability to trade without it being getting in between them. Iran has a strong manufacturing sector. It's a major trading partner. I don't see Russia dumping Iran for almost any purpose. I don't see them, say sending troops there if Iran gets attacked or something. But they're not going to just dump them for no reason, because there's a lot of ties between them that is way more than just the basic things people think about Iran. It's a middle income country with a diverse manufacturing sector and a pretty large population.
Hold on. Here's the direct quote. Iran. This is from Putin. Iran should never be in a position capable of destroying Israel. So
I sure didn't see Putin saying that, but Russia's always. I don't even know what that means, but Russia's always had pretty decent relations with Israel, and they don't really want to see either side destroy each other, and they've been one of the people that have always gone along. They've been one of the parties that always helped make any arms control agreement relating to Iran work, that was able to, deal with things relating to nuclear refinement or this or that. So, I mean, I don't even see that being a change in Russia's longstanding position. I would say the power that you have rising in the Middle East is Turkey, and that's a country that very commonly gets their way, that has an enormous army, that is willing to do or say basically anything. And, we've entered an era of Israeli-Turkic domination in the Middle East and not of Iranian. So I seriously doubt that anywhere on the list of Putin's concerns is the growth of Iran's power at this exact moment. So I would say that if they're going to be worried about any power gaining, growing in the Middle East, it's definitely Turkey, that has a huge army. It controls the straits that Russia needs. It's a very cynical country that often gets its way, or other times, makes a big show of being difficult and then caves in it. I mean, it does either of those things. But regardless, this is a new era of Israeli-Turkish domination of the Middle East that we're in, and I don't think Iran is nearly as big of a factor as people imagine.
I don't. It's weird though. Then to send the carriers over there last night.
Well,
right?
I mean, that's because Trump is surrounded by a bunch of maniacs who are obsessed with Iran. That has nothing to do with reality.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why is Netanyahu so obsessed with Iran? Like, he's convinced they're the boogeyman and they just want to destroy Israel.
Because the hardliners in Israel and Iran need each other to justify their own existence. This is a very common concept in international relations. I mean, the U.S. and the Soviets functioned the same way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's too bad, and it's like, all of us, just regular people, have our lives basically destroyed by these power-hungry maniacs.
And not we have that, and then you also have just constant, especially with Republicans. I feel like constant Republican voter domestic priorities are always the first thing to get leveraged in order for Republicans to get what they want on foreign policy matters in Congress, especially, and that is the thing that pisses me off more than anything. It's one reason I get so passionate about this. Most people have no idea how often Republican domestic priorities or voter priorities get leveraged or get sacrificed in order to secure funding and support for overseas adventures.
Yeah, well, it's easy when you spread out the production of and manufacturing of arms equipment through every congressional district in the country, and then no one's able to vote against it because they're like, oh, this is 5,000 jobs in your district. Like, oh, these bombs may be falling there, but they're made in Littleton, Colorado, whatever thing like that. Like, it's a whole scam. Like, and this is the way it works. And now they openly admit it a lot of the time too. They're like, oh, well, we may be, sending this to Ukraine, but 80% of it is money that's spent in the United States. Like, yeah, our tax money that is given to arms contractors.
Right.
What are you talking
it's corporate
about?
welfare. And my whole point is, I'm like, okay, but if we spent that on bridges or roads or even food stamps,
or just didn't tax it.
Yeah, it would still be getting spent in America, okay? Except then we'd actually have something to show for it.
And it would be spread out among,
right.
the general public, not going to a small, group of financial interests that control arms manufacturers.
Right, that we can't even track exactly how many people are employed by this industry. I remember looking and trying one day, and it's very hard to tack down the exact number.
Well, also, everything the military does is, so much stuff in the military is contracted out now. For example, take a company like Sodexo or Aramark or something like that. The military is not serving its own lunches or, doing its own laundry or any number of things like this, that they used to do 50, 75 years ago. They used to have all these low-level people that were, cooks or this or that. I think they're on Navy ships. I think they still have cooks that are enlisted. But, when they're at sea or whatever. But, in general, any company that provides services is an enormous military contract. I don't know if you ever read the book The Complex by Nick Turse. It's from it's almost 20 years old now, but it just is about this, how deep they are and everything. Like Burger King's an enormous military contractor. Dunkin' Donuts, because they're feeding people on bases. They have people maintaining their golf courses. Yeah. They have people supplying them cars, their computers, their, everything. So it's like the entire economy is enmeshed in this. And, I mean, and Hollywood can't make military movies if they portray the military badly, because otherwise they can't get the equipment to use that they need for the movie to work, Like, they're not going to give you a tank if you make them look like shit or, whatever. It's crazy.
Right. Yeah, I live right next door to Fort Bragg, so I've seen it. When I was a kid, the soldiers used to maintain all of even the landscaping, like they did it all. Yeah. And it used to be so nice. You go on the base now, it just looks like shit. It's been contracted out, and it's just so, it's so ridiculous. It's all so run down. It
was surrounded by shitty mini malls and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of that's been like shut down. They're just like sitting there empty. I mean, there's sometimes they'll bring in new stores, but there are strips that are just like completely empty. Yeah, everything got contracted out, and now everything sucks.
It's not even clear what soldiers do with their time when they're not like out at war. I've asked several of them about this, and they do usually tell you that they don't really work very much. They waste a bunch of time photocopying and making like PowerPoint presentations. The military loves PowerPoint, even though it's really outdated now, and all this other stuff like this. But it's like the overwhelming. Kind of like the hallmark of American military power is overwhelming logistical superiority, and it's not necessarily a good or bad thing. I'm saying that as a value-free thing. It's just true. Like the average soldier in the field has like 6.5 support staff behind them for one that's down there, which it's good to not be caught without equipment and to have the intel you need, etc. But, regardless, like, this means, like, huge amounts of the military are not doing anything that is, like, directly, going to war-related, and that they have a bunch of them there for if they need them. So, yeah, it's really is crazy the extent to which they contract out this stuff instead of just using them as a labor force, which the vast majority of countries in all of human history have done, is, they have their soldiers out there making roads or, at least maintaining their own damn base, because what the hell else are you going to do with them all day?
Right. Yeah, it's such, I don't know. What's frustrating to me, it would be fine if the base still looked nice, but it doesn't. It looks like shit all the time. It used to be like, well, that's because, you're commanding, the garrison commander is not doing his job, and it's like, well, we've been through like 10 of them now, so I'm pretty sure it's actually not him. It's not them. It's a
contractor you hire doesn't give a shit, yeah.
Yeah, and apparently they have no power to do anything about it, so... And you see this kind of across the base or across the board anytime. I feel like some of these essential services are privatized, which we saw. I don't know if you guys saw. I haven't even had time to dig on it. Is that now apparently the HUD has contracted with the Department of Interior, and they're going to start building low-income houses on federal land.
Yeah, allegedly they're looking into something like that. I don't know just what that means, but yeah, as someone that lives around a lot of that land, I do think that there needs to be reform in how federal land works. But I will tell you that the cities out here are not overbuilt at all. You could eminent domain some crappy little houses and be building like 10-story buildings if you need more housing. Like there is no reason that they need to put a bunch of pores in our like national forests and shit. It's crazy.
It's going to be a total scam.
That's the line out of this podcast. There's no reason to put pores in our national forest.
It's true, though. Yeah. All right,
anyway, I've got to wrap it up. But this was really fun. Thank you. Thanks so much for bringing all your
such
knowledge.
a wealth of knowledge.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, and where can people find you?
Okay, so my main website, my Substack, is thewaywardrabbler.com. I am on Twitter at Wayward Rabbler. I'm now a features writer for the new magazine called Commonplace. It's associated with the American Compass think tank. And I'm also at the American Conservative and the Libertarian Institute.
Great.
Yay.
Thank you so much, Brad.